Ladies and gentlemen, it is the king, the guy. You know what? Let me rewind. It is your boy, CIZY, back at it again with another episode of Voices of Value podcast with a lavender drink. We got my boy Malai walking in the corner. You know, it's good to have a little viewer, you know, a little support in the crowd. You know what I'm saying? While you're doing your thing. And I tell you guys, every single week, we're going to come back with a fire guest. I've yet to lie to you in year after year after year. I guess we just call that consistency, right? Something like that. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a gentleman by the name of Mitchell Thompson. Hopefully I said that correct. There ain't no way you can mess that up, but I could have messed it up. So I'll let him introduce himself shortly. But before I do that, make sure you share, subscribe, like, drop a comment, even if it's just an emoji because you haven't heard the conversation yet. That is the only way we can grow. If you do not support, if you do not engage, people do not see the content, people do not get to hear the valuable conversations that are being had on the show, and therefore, all of this is almost, not all the way, but almost for nothing. So make sure you share it. That being said, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people, my brother.
What's up, everybody? My name is Mitchell Thompson, personal trainer, wellness professional, health consultant. I'm from Kansas City. I was born actually in California, but I'm from Kansas City, raised in Kansas City my whole life. And yeah, man, I really like what you got going on here more than anything. I mean, least about me, I'm interested to hear a little about you at some point because I'm a video editor, video production guy, and to see you like pop on the scene was pretty reassuring for me as a local guy because it's dope to see not only somebody from the area killing it with some quality content, but another local light-skinned brother, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Representing.
Yes, sir. And that's part of the conversation today because, look, we could just jump right in right there. So, you know, Mitchell, I came across your content through our guy, previous guest, the Mr. Get You Fresh, Mr. Fave and Fold, Mr. Rudy. So our guy Rudy, mutual friend of ours up north, introduced me to the podcast. I watched a few of your episodes, started following you, seeing some of your content, saw you hustling, producing the content. You know, you can always tell when somebody is doing all the work behind the scenes. There's just a certain energy that comes about in the content. It's like, you know what? I know he put this, I know he like edited this together. I know he went and found this guest. I know that he's, you know, really doing his research for the people that he brings on. I know he's, you know, there's just the energy you have. So first off, shout out to Rudy Faithful.
Shout out to Rudy Faithful.
He will definitely get you right. He's also an individual who is going on his own content journey and he's killing it. It's making me really happy to see, you know, there's a lot of people in their respective industries that'll talk about improving or adding on other skill sets to kind of like generate interest and leads and build up their business. Right. And then there's only a select few that actually do it. So
and do it consistently.
So our guy Rudy is definitely stepping his game up in that lane and it's making me really happy. I think I saw some content he did the other day, like a little voiceover, and he's like, and he's talking in like this low voice.
Bro, and his content is getting quality content too.
It was
like
good.
The quality of the footage is getting real nice. Yeah.
Hell yeah. So shout out to Rudy.
Yeah, shout out Rudy.
But yeah, early on, saw you doing some content. I was like, okay, there we go. Some more motivation to keep going probably from the same perspective as you. Sometimes it's really difficult to continue wanting to do something, especially in your community. If you feel like you're the only one in the community doing it, there can be like a level of motivation, I guess, just being like, well, I'm leading the front. But on the flip side, I want to feel like everyone in my community and my city is hustling and trying to create top tier content, trying to provide top tier value and information to the world and be like a hub for education, information, and entertainment, just like LA or Miami, right, or you know, Chicago. Some of these other cities are known for having the best doctors or the best podcasters or the best athletes.
They ain't got the best football team.
They sure the fuck don't. Talk about it. You feel me? But I ain't gonna lie, when I first saw your content, I was like, all right, is my good brother Asian, black and brown, full black, half black, little white, little black, Mexican, Asian? You got to get some of that same ethnic ambiguity. I do, and it's all dependent upon where my hairstyle's at.
Okay, fair enough.
Hairstyle and beard, and if my beard's thicker, lighter, bald face.
That's what you got me on because they think if I'm ever in the Arab category that I'm like a bald faced Middle Easterner if they ever throw that at me. But yeah, I feel you on that. No, I'm half black, half white. My dad has a lot of Native American on his side, so it's really hard to quantify the ethnic makeup of the Native American side. But yeah, I mean, are you biracial also?
Yeah, so mom's
heard you say somebody's from Tanzania, right?
Correct. My mom, yeah. So my mom's from Tanzania and dad's white guy from Kansas City. You know?
Okay, fair enough.
Not to make that sound boring.
Not at all. But I mean, Tanzania, I can assure you your mom had a bunch of different cultural upbringing.
Yes, a much more interesting experience than Kansas City in the 40s. Right?
For sure. Are your parents older or are they?
Yeah, older. So my dad's 47, my mom born in 47.
Okay, I was getting ready to say 47.
Mom born in 57, so they're both in 60s and 70s.
Yeah, my dad was born in 58, mom born in 62.
Nice.
Older parents also. Something about them biracial parents that be having them late, you know?
Yeah, man. They be like 41 and shit. Be like, let's pop one out. I'll be like, y'all was really trying to just risk it with me, huh? Y'all just wanted me to have some issues potentially. Okay, cool. Thank you.
So yeah, being biracial, it's one of those things where, like you said, there's an ethnic ambiguity to our presence, right? So growing up, I'm sure you experienced this, and I argued with this with my boys all the time. There was a level of discrimination on both sides. It's like you talk to ethnic, you talk with too much ebonics on one side of the field and you get treated one way. You talk with too much properness on the other side of the field, you get treated a different type of way.
I don't remember the exact lyrics, but I remember my brother's an artist, and one thing I remember him saying in a song early on, and I like identify, he's like 7 years older than me, so he dropped the song, I was like 21, I was like 14 or something. It's like, a little too white for the black and too black for the white, and I was like, yeah, you goddamn right.
Right, legit.
Because you'll be, You'll be with a crew of people, a crew of your good brothers, and you're speaking a little too. There's a plenty of different. I don't want to only use that example, but let's just use that example to keep it simple. Speaking a little too proper, right? You're too proper, or you dress differently, or maybe you don't value having a lineup and being super moisturized as much as we do. Just little just weird tidbits. You getting clown for this, clown for that.
What does that do to your identity? You know what I'm saying?
Right. It really has you a little confused because you like, hold up, like y'all definitely accepted me initially.
Right.
All right, but now I'm feeling like I'm being shunned, or I guess you could say pushed away. But then when I go over to this clique or group of people, now you guys are making little slide jokes that you think is funny, but is low key messing with me a little bit. If I'm in class and the pencil disappears, and you're like, oh, must be the black kid, and I'm the only black kid in the room. And it's like, okay, like, sure, it could be funny. Just joking, bro. I'm just messing with you. It's like, all right.
Well, what does that do to the developmental, especially the developmental process of the child developing an identity? Like, that's one thing, bro. I've had so many clients, because it's really consulting, but there's forms of counseling, and some of my clients look at it as therapy, right?
Yeah.
Well, I've had so many people come in that, especially young men, and the more culturally diverse they are, you realize that is a fundamental issue, especially if you're an immigrant coming to America, because then you have that, well, you're not ethnically as pure as your people back in the motherland. Or like you're in my situation, you have so much ethnic diversity that you can appeal to multiple different groups. And what does that make us do? It makes us, in one sense, identify with a group, but as soon as we leave that group, we almost are forced to identify with another group because of how juxtaposing those two groups are.
Yeah, and I found one thing I did find helpful, although there is a challenge within this thought process as well for me, and I'm sure for others, but like one thing my dad always said, I didn't necessarily like it coming from him for obvious reasons, but, well, I perceive as obvious reasons, but like he always used to say, you're not African, you're not white, you're a member of the human race.
You're a human.
And I was like, you know what? I respect that, and at the end of the day, that is what I truly, like, if we were getting down to the complete root of it all, I truly identify as, hey, I'm a part of the human race.
Exactly.
Like, I'm a part of humanity. Now, I don't want that to say it takes away from my cultural experiences, for the love I have from my Tanzanian culture, for the love I have from what I'm going to say adopted, because by fact, I'm not Black American, but being adopted into that community because they immediately assume that's what you are. They're not like, oh, you must be Tanzanian. No, they're like, nah, you a nigga.
Man, that is very sound of you to be so self-aware to recognize that, like, there's a difference in me even having a mother from Africa versus especially Southeast Africa, because it was Tanzania by like Kenya.
Yep, right below Kenya.
Right below Kenya, right? Yep. So there's there is, I applaud you for being able to even have that level of humility, because I know a lot of my biracial in particular brothers who don't even recognize one side of their ethnic background, and it completely dishonors one part of their ethnic history, which is
true.
I don't know if that's necessarily always a good thing.
Yeah.
You know?
I would agree. And I think like you become only more aware of that as you get older and see racial discrimination between Black Americans and Africans.
Right.
Who now are Americans.
Right, 100%.
Like the racism between the two communities is crazy, rampant.
Right.
And so then you really realize like, oh wait. But then again, like going back to like that, who the fuck am I?
Right.
It's like, wait, now I'm starting to realize as I'm older, y'all don't even like each other.
Right.
So now I'm getting clowned by my brothers once they find out that I'm African booty scratcher. Like, I bet your mama ain't got no money, blah, blah, blah. Where'd you get those shoes from? We sent them to y'all, like whatever. We sent those to you, you know, those are my throwaway shoes. You probably got those when you was back home. I'm like, what? I'm confused. But then like, my dad being an older white dude, you probably connected to the slave trade. Your great grandfather was probably a slave owner. I'm like, I need to chill out with all these jokes. So I totally feel you. I feel like that is a 3-hour conversation within itself. But it's definitely interesting and consistently trying to navigate as you get older, like how to be a part of these conversations when it comes to justice and humanity, especially, for years, but especially the past few years with George Floyd and all the issues that brought it, just like made it more of a front page conversation. Because I feel like it calmed down for a few, not saying negative things that are happening to communities of color calmed down, but in terms of it being the front and center in the media, I feel like it wasn't as all in your face growing up, at least from my experience, except for what was the young kid's name where there was a huge it was the Skittles, you remember? Trayvon Martin. And then so there was that, and then there was George Floyd, and then there was just a whole bunch of other things plus COVID and all these things going on where I'm like, okay, like how do I fit into like this conversation?
Right.
How do I step in and like have a voice in this space?
Have a voice of value. Yeah,
have a voice of value in this space without overstepping boundaries because I'm not Black American.
Right.
I'm African, but I'm also Caucasian. And
I don't think that diminishes though your overall opinion as a human.
Facts. And so that was what I was trying to figure out. I was like, okay, my human voice, like from a humanity standpoint, how can I speak on the topics at hand and stuff? So always a challenge. Great way to start the conversation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to answer your question, I'm half Black, half white.
To get to it,
And what's funny is we're inverse functions of each other because my dad's Black, my mom's white, and you got the opposite.
Yeah,
so
which is funny because I saw this quote earlier today. It was a Facebook post, and it was like some joke. I sent it to my brother, and it was like, "All right, it's February 15th, ladies and gentlemen, which means it is my final day of Black History Month because my dad is Black, my mom's white." He was like, "All right, brothers, y'all take over from here on out." And I was cracking up. I was like, I sent it. So me and my family, there's 8 of us. My dad raised us all, but he's not the father of us.
8 brothers and sisters?
Yes, I'm the baby.
Okay.
So my dad raised everyone. Everyone calls my dad, but not everyone is my dad. So,
but are they all your moms?
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
So all like the 5 of my siblings are, what we would in modern day culture call dark skin, and then the last 3, me, my sister ahead of my age, and my brother ahead of that. So, he's like 7 years older, she's 4 years older, and then there's me. We're the last 3 born. We all light skinned,
gotcha.
Biracial.
Same father?
Correct.
Gotcha,
and then everyone else is beautifully Black.
Are any of them from Africa and your older siblings?
Everybody except for me was born in Tanzania.
Wow.
So
even your biracial siblings.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my parents met over there. My dad went over there to teach English. Well, really, he went over there in I guess you could say as a, what do they call it? Missionary?
Yeah.
We don't necessarily call that in our religion, but it's the same thing.
What's your religion?
It's called the Baha'i faith.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily, it's the same thing. We're going over to try to spread the faith just like any other religion is.
Yeah, I'm trying to, that
different
sounds
tactics.
Vaguely familiar.
Being that you are a very well-educated and read individual, I'm pretty sure you probably have heard about it, watched a video, something at some point. If there's somebody that's come on this show that I would be like, yeah, they might know something, it's going to be you. So
I wrote a whole book about this in 2016. So
there we go.
Yeah, finalized in 2018. So
we got too much to talk about there. Or there's going to be a part 2 because I didn't even know you had a book before this other book.
Well, I have 4 total.
Oh, shit, look. Collis is slacking on his research, ladies and gentlemen.
It's all good, bro.
But, yeah, man. So it's just interesting growing up. You know,
that's an amazing diversity.
Yeah. It was nice inside, which is why when you're growing up, everything is regular until it's not.
Exactly.
And it gets introduced to you from the outside world, which is why everyone's so fearful of like, should I send my kids to public school or should I? How do I educate? It's like, bruh, you can't hide your kids from the world. At some point, they're gonna get exposed. You know,
I think adversely, if you do hide your kids from the world, you're gonna end up causing them a bunch of trauma because they haven't experienced the trauma to overcome all those obstacles that end up building that character.
100%. And I feel like the earlier on, the better, in my humble
100%.
opinion. But again, who knows?
I think it's after like 3 or 5 years old is when you want to start integrating the socialization of children.
Right. Yeah. I was like trying to research this a few years ago because I'm like, I used to have like this obsession with having a child early in life. Now I'm like, you know what? Whenever it happens, it happens.
How old are you?
I'm 27.
Okay, so we're the same age.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Nice.
So I was like, I'm trying to have my first baby at 18. I'm trying to be married at 18.
Did you go to school around here?
I went to school in Independence primarily. So everything, all the schools in Independence. I went to Truman. I went to Chrisman. I went to the alternative school. I was not dropped out.
Fair enough.
GED program. Back out of the GED program. Back into high school.
Fair enough.
That's a whole lot of experience.
Well, I'm going to interview you at some point.
We might as well.
For sure.
But man, I don't even know. I'm thinking like 3,000 things. So what I want to dive into is early on in your life, what was a moment that has kind of defined who you've become today in terms of like, hey, you know, for Collis, for example, you know, when I was younger, I love sports. I got introduced to soccer, really fell in love with soccer, played soccer growing up till like 8th grade. Sports is my thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to become a pro soccer player. That's all I'm focused on. I don't really care about school, none of this. Pro soccer player. And then that ended up shaping direction I went. So never was good enough at sports. Figured out, all right, what else do people do when they're a failed sports athlete? Okay, go train athletes. Wanted to go train athletes. Figured out I'm not going to go to school. I don't like college. So what's my next way to get a foot in the industry? Personal training. Here we are, 7 years later as a personal trainer being in the industry, right? So now my obsession is all around wellness, health, public health, protecting and promoting public health at the end of the day. So that's kind of like, does that make sense? Like 100%. Introduction to soccer and sports led me to where I'm at today. What would that be for you?
I think that's very reminiscent of most. I mean, I don't think it's male or female, really. I think it's most competitive athletes, no matter what, they're competing to be the best. And when you're competing to be the best, if not the best in your domain, at least the best version of yourself in that domain, which I think is a healthier approach, whole nother conversation. But I think being able to be humbled by life knowing you're not the best, because even if you're the best in the small pond, as soon as you get to a bigger pond, you end up realizing there's way bigger fish out there. And once you hit that ceiling of your potential, bro, I don't even know, what is it, like less than a percentage of people make it to professional leagues in their respective sports? It's like, so for you to even be qualified to be a professional, you've got to be so extraordinary that I think the majority of athletes experience what you just described rather than anything other than. And anything other than that is usually being a professional, or at least playing to a high enough level where your skill can almost going to like be a coach or something, right? Your skill can kind of bypass you from having to be that professional, but you're still operating in that professional realm. From an actual athlete to a contributor to whatever the sport is, even an analyst, right? Even if you're like if you're a physical therapist for the sports team. I know personally a physical therapist who for the Baltimore Ravens did, I think 2 or 3 years of his physical therapy. It was either his internship or his first 3 entry years. And for him, that was how he satisfied the taste of being a professional, right? It was by being surrounded in that environment. So mine was, I think, very reminiscent, again, of what you experienced. Mine was in basketball, though. Again, talk about the racial implications of being biracial, playing in the inner city and then going up to any of these Shawnee Mission schools to play. There's a stark difference with regards to how you're perceived and how you're treated. But yeah, once my high school, so I played competitively throughout all of high school, went to William Jewell College, didn't decide to play, could have walked on, didn't really get any scholarships or nothing, but didn't really have that interest to play because I had that same exact feeling you had, which is like, shit, can I even be a professional athlete? If I'm having to try it at William Jewell, I probably can't be a professional athlete, right? So I focused on academics, triple majored at William Jewell, but never went to class. So I think the most defining.
You said how the fuck
triple
does that
majored
work?
in college, never went to class. So what it is, and when you really understand this, it sounds fancy, but it ain't fancy whatsoever. If you're going to be an engineer, let's say there's 10 classes you need to be an engineer. 8 of those classes are required to be a physicist or a mathematician. So for me, I was like, okay, I might as well major in engineering and physics or engineering and math. And then you look at the same prerequisites for mathematics and physics, and it's nearly the exact same sort of scenario. So it's like, why wouldn't I take 4 to 10 more classes in this proverbial sense to get 2 more degrees when I've already met 70% of the requirements for one of, if not 2 of these other degrees? So I was in calculus 3 as a freshman amongst all these seniors. Like I was in all these high level classes, and I was so arrogant that I thought, you know what? I got an A on my first Calc 3 test. There's a bunch of juniors and seniors in here. I'm triple majoring. I need to go to class. So I didn't go to class. Syllabus had an attendance policy, which I never read because who reads syllabuses? And yeah, I ended up flunking out essentially. They told me not to even come take my final because of how much my grade had got reduced from the lack of attendance. So I think that was probably the most defining moment for me, because that then set the ball rolling for me eventually writing my first book, me eventually failing in the promotion of that book, essentially, because, you know, at like 19, trying to write this book, I'm thinking I'm going to be on Joe Rogan and shit, delusional as can be. And then I end up going to actually find a publicist, find a literary agent, all these things, fail. And that kind of set me on the ball towards me getting humbled even further by life, where I end up being technically homeless, even though, I mean, me and my pops are staying at hotels, motels and shit, but it's like we didn't have a home, right? I'm couch surfing from friend to friend, from family to family for years on end, for 2 years. And it made me realize at the crux of all of that, damn, like you're chasing some false delusional dreams that if you keep chasing them, you may just be going in a vicious cycle of insanity. And so I had to break that at some point, which this was 2019. And when I broke that cycle, I ended up being able to get to where I'm at now, which is essentially establishing myself as personal trainer, health and wellness consultant, if you will, and just overall health professional. There's a little short, long-winded answer for
Right,
that.
gives me like 3,000 questions, but it's all good. So what were you doing with your time skipping out on school? Like, what do you remember during that time period where you're like not going to school that whole semester or 2 semesters and you're not showing up? What were you doing? What were you spending your time doing? Are you at work? You're like, you know what? I'm gonna skip out, go get a bag.
If only. Not
Exactly.
even.
Go get a bag,
Right.
or I'm over here wilding out, just having fun.
Degeneracy, but not even to the fun capacity. Meaning, I'm not going to parties. I'm not going to the bar. And me and my older brother, who's 4 years my senior, I think he's 4 years older than me. We look just alike. So I was using his ID in high school to buy all my friends alcohol and shit, right? So allegedly. So right.
Make sure, yeah.
Right, I don't know the statute of limitations on that,
allegedly,
right?
hypothetically.
But so yeah, I wasn't even having fun really from the proverbial sense of having fun. Man, I think I was so distraught and disappointed, like most high-level athletes, because I was a first-year starter as a freshman in basketball, and my sophomore year, never really played football my whole life. The only time I played football was in 4th grade for the Kansas City Giants, and if anybody in that metro area knows, they're the worst team in the league, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up starting as a sophomore as the starting wide receiver in football. And like these things kind of diluted my mentality that I was destined to be an athlete, especially because I had the academics to substantiate the hardest part for most athletes, which is getting their grades right.
Yep.
Going D1, the hardest part is getting good grades. And I'm over here like, the hardest part is getting good grades. The hardest part for me is trying to get 2 more inches on my vertical so I can dunk this basketball. Right? So there was a fallout that I had with myself, with not only realizing I didn't know who I was if I wasn't an athlete, but there was no guidance on how to recover from that fallout. So, pun intended, using the word fallout. You ever heard of the game Fallout, like Fallout 4, all that shit? Yeah. I was playing Fallout 4 like crazy, my boy. That game, like I was playing it like it was Sims. I was playing it like it was Minecraft, like I'm building on it and shit, right? So I'm wasting time on this video game doing monotonous, tedious, time-consuming stuff that has no benefit benefit for me whatsoever, all because I was trying to drown out the sorrows that I inevitably had to address before I was able to overcome all of that identity crisis sort of issues I was experiencing. So what was I doing? Playing video games and doing a whole lot of nothing.
And I don't want to lose that spot right there, but I think there's a something to explore within what you just said. So a lot of times people think it's drinking. A lot of times for a lot of people,
right,
it's drinking, it's partying. For a lot of people, it's sex. For a lot of people, it's relationship jumping.
How about the clothes you wear, the
right,
J's you buy, the this and that, right?
There's so many different routes that people go down to distract them or to put a veil over their eyes so that they can't see what they really need to see to make that next move.
An overcompensation for their own delusion.
An overcompensation for their own delusion. I like that. What do you think about, and I think this is a great question for you as a personal trainer, as somebody who cares about wellness and health, what do you think about individuals who do that same thing, but their drug of choice is exercise? Their drug of choice is, I'm going to just train out of my mind for 6 hours a day, focus 100% on meal prepping and nutrition, and go to my job so I got some money or whatever, and then repeat that. But they're really just utilizing it as a veil. What would be your thoughts or your words of advice or recommendation to somebody who's doing that? Because I know quite a few people who spent 6 years getting shredded to the gills, hustling hard. I love it. And I was admiring at first. And then later I come to learn that they were depressed. They were suffering. And that was what they were using as a mask, which normally is supposed to be the tool to get out of that.
I think more than anything, if there's a drug of choice to have, being a gym addict is probably the best one.
Yeah.
I think the only real detrimental aspect to that behavior is going to be, it's actually multifold. And I think you as a personal trainer can respect one specific aspect of it, but it's, if you're training the wrong way and you're an addict to the gym and you're never taught to train the right way, you're now developing a bunch of bad habits and behaviors that you think are good, but end up leading you to having knee surgery or slipped discs or destroyed fascia or connective tissue or even torn muscles, strained ligaments, compressed bones. Like these, it's very important how you approach anything, especially if you're going to do it to an effective degree. And fitness, I think, is one of those things that people almost look away at when they think about, well, at least they're working out, at least they're taking care of their health. But when you dive into the deeper aspect of what they're actually doing, if they're doing it the wrong way, like if they're following a nutrition protocol that may not be best for them, but they've been taught that it is, if they're doing a workout protocol that they see a dude on steroids on YouTube doing and they think, well, he looks good, so I can do that same thing, and think they're going to get the same results, it almost causes them to be wasting away as bad as other hard drugs could have been. But I still think that's a better outlet than doing some other hard drugs, right?
Right.
But the totality of the behavior is one of what? Overcompensation for delusion. And if you can recognize at that point, if at least at some point in their journey, and if at some point in their journey it's having to have their ACL torn, or if it's having to have their spine compressed and bulging discs and stuff, if that's what causes them to realize, okay, I can't just keep overcompensating, I think no matter what drug of choice you use, at some point in your life, you're confronted with that cold reality, which is, what are you actually doing and what are you actually running from? And most people don't choose the gym. Why? Because the gym isn't as good as a masking coping mechanism as something like alcohol, as something like amphetamines, as something like any drug that you can really pinpoint towards people's outlet for their compensatory behavior. You end up realizing that it doesn't really matter what drug of choice you choose, even if it's as good a drug as getting into the gym, because at the end of the day, the base behavior is what? Or the base problem is what? That behavior. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it don't matter if it's still a better drug, it's still a drug, and they still need an outlet, which is honestly what I do for a living. They need an outlet, a coach, a professional who can look at their whole entire roadmap, we'll say, from an outside perspective and try to help them optimize where they're qualified to help them optimize.
100%. And to go back to my placeholder, what was that torn ACL, that cold reality for you? You're playing Fallout 4. What was the moment where you're like, yo, what am I doing? And what caused you to like ask yourself that question? What was the moment of self-awareness?
think it was a series of fallen dominoes. The first one was failing out of William Jewell, thinking I was about to stay there for 3 years and then transfer to Missouri S&T and be a triple major and do all these things. Like, that was the first cold reality check. So then I thought I was doing good by trying to write a book. Failing on that book, another cold reality check, especially after it took 3 years to write, right? I'm over here thinking at 18 when I'm starting it, I literally had this thought, and I told my boys this, I'm going to be on Joe Rogan at 19 years old. Watch, it's going to be the craziest shit. Compensatory delusion. You know what I'm saying? And this was when he was like in the thousands of episodes. So it's not like Joe Rogan when he was in the basement with that one dude, with that Brian Redband, right? It's like when he's actually solidified, right?
Yeah.
So that was another humbling experience. That was another torn ACL, we'll say. I think the most humbling experience is when I am thinking that I'm still chasing this dream, but in all reality, I'm couch surfing and inevitably living out of motels, and on occasion, not to mention it being in Colorado during October, but on occasion sleeping at a park once or twice. And you end up realizing when you're having to insulate a slide with a bedding sheet that you stole from a motel, you end up realizing, yeah, maybe my standard of living could be a little bit better than this. And when you question that, you say, well, how then do I get to a better standard of living? And you ask yourself, well, you have to be better. And that qualifies you having to take initiative and take accountability for why you're not better. And I think that was 2019. That was before Thanksgiving 2019. Because that's when me and my pops drove back to Kansas City, when I essentially had a conversation with him where it's like, look, you're retired. You don't have to worry about none of this, but I can't keep living like this. And I don't have an ID in this state. I was doing freelance work, so like I wasn't able to do anything legit. I was like, the only place I'm going to be able to do something legit is back at home in Kansas City. So literally the day of Thanksgiving 2019, I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a snowstorm that year. We drove back through that snowstorm, through Kansas, through Colorado, to get back to Kansas City while everybody else was enjoying their warm turkeys inside their warm houses. So I think that was probably the most implicating inflection point, because from that point, I ended up getting 2 jobs, which that wasn't foreign to me because I had to do that when I first dropped out of school. But getting 2 jobs, having to work these 9 to 5 and having to also work a 5 to 9, having to then really ask myself, how are you going to get your own place? Then having to qualify to even be able to get the apartment, to be able to get my own spot, and then being able to qualify to sustain those finances. Once I got that ball rolling, everything else pretty much started lining up in place.
So would you say that those were like your first 2 steps in your head? It's like, okay, when you asked yourself, how do I, you got to the moment where you're like, how do I improve my current standard of living? I understand that I have the control to do that. I understand that I need to do that. How do I do that? And so step 1, okay, I need to work. I need to secure capital. Step 2, I need to get a place of my own to establish a sense of independence for myself, for my own mental well-being, and to let myself know that I can do that. What was 3, 4, and 5? What's after that? So you get your own apartment, you start working, you get your own apartment. What was the vision from there? And kind of how do you feel like you obviously didn't quit on the idea of writing a book.
Right.
You quit on the idea of that book or whatever was happening.
Pigeonholing myself in that
lane.
Right.
Exactly. So the idea wasn't, I quit, I'm not good at writing, I suck, I'll never be able to be good at this. It was, this ain't it, and I've realized that. So I guess next step thoughts, like, are you still thinking about writing a book and just change the lane? Are you thinking about a new career path? Like, what's happening, let's say, right when the pandemic hits, because that would have been 4 months after you just arrived back home.
Which was crazy, because as soon as I start getting these jobs and I'm over here getting security, everything shut down, right? And I started working at 9 Round, which is a kickboxing joint, which at the end of the day, I have a whole documentary on YouTube that tells exactly what happened on that front. But essentially,
Fun fact, I worked at 9 Round for like 2 weeks in San Diego.
Savage, nice,
So,
yeah. And being in like the combat realm, it was easy for me to be successful in that domain. But essentially, when I left 9 Round, I knew being a personal trainer was where I knew just teaching. Like, I've always wanted to teach. Like, realistically, with the engineering degree, the math degree, the physics degree, I eventually wanted to be a professor. Like, that was the whole plan, teaching. So steps 3, 4, 5, after realizing I have to be taking accountability for my life circumstances and understanding the roadmap, irrespective of how I feel, having to define and know the roadmap of what was best for me to get to that goal. Funny enough, my most recent book is a children's book, and it's called The Fun Adventures of Willie and Abel. And the idea behind the book is Willie is always willing to help people out. He's always willing to be there and to do what he can, and he's willing to help people out. But oftentimes he fails in his ability. He can't always be there to help somebody with regards to what he's capable of because he just doesn't have the ability to do it. And adversely, you've got Abel. And Abel has all the abilities in the world. And in fact, I characterize him in the book as somebody who's usually playing video games, kind of wasting their time because they have this underlying ability, but what is he lacking? That willingness. He doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't have that willingness to get up off his feet and actually do something productive with his life. He has all the ability in the world like Mitchell did when he was homeless, but he doesn't have the willingness to get out of his circumstances and do what he has to, not what he wants to, what he has to in order to be better. And so I wrote this children's book because that was a philosophy that I embodied in those early stages. I would say, if anything, that was steps 1 and 2, was first me realizing, are you willing to be better? Mm-hmm. Second step was, are you now able to do what you have to get better? Mm-hmm. And the answer to both of those is always yes. It's now defining how willing are you and to what capacity are you able to? And getting out of that to the point where I finally am independent, we'll say, when I was able to get my own spot, have a steady source of income. The next steps after that were redefining how much more optimal my current roadmap could be, which again was just doubling down on those two qualities of, okay, what do you have to do? Well, you want to be a personal trainer. You want to not have to work for a boss like you just worked for. All right, you're going to have to eventually open up your own gym. You're going to have to eventually at least open up your own private practice. All right, are you willing to do that? Shit, I mean, that's a lot of work, homie. That's a whole lot of work, right?
It is.
But then you end up realizing, what else am I going to do if I truly want to achieve those goals? And I would say that was the sparking fuse that led to steps 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which can be defined a plethora of different ways. But the foundation I think that's most important is really defining how I got myself out of those depressive tendencies, those self-loathing tendencies, and the actual working formula that got me out of it, irrespective of if it was me, if it was Mitchell. It could have been anybody. And as long as they were willing to address the accountability and they were able to define how to get out of that, you won't really even need to hire a personal coach. It just may be a little harder if you don't have somebody helping you guide you a little bit, which I think was what was so difficult for me, especially in the early stages.
I love that. Again, every time I open up the space for you to speak after a question, you say like 6,000 things.
Yeah, my bad. I can slow down a little bit.
No. I'm saying 6,000 ththings that make me want to ask double down questions on each of them. So it's always exciting and like a little starburst in my head because I'm like, question.
Right.
Question,
I'll tell you this. It's funny because I've been doing a lot of short format radio interviews lately, like the one I had last week.
Yeah.
And dude, like you don't get enough long format time to actually thoroughly discuss ideas that people can actually benefit from. Mm-hmm. And so I was practicing having to short format everything. So if I wink twice, if you need me to start short format and stuff.
wink twice if you're safe. But no.
Mitchell starts rambling. Just give me a couple of winks.
Homie. All good. What I do want to jump to is your first few clients in the health and wellness space, personal training. I mean, there's so many ways to describe that because it's funny. At one point in my life, I was like, okay, I'm a fitness trainer. Then at another point in my life, I'm like, I'm a wellness consultant.
Right.
And then at another point in my life, I'm like, I'm a practicer or something. Just so many ways that in my head I was like defining what I do. Mm-hmm. So in whatever ways you personally define what you do.
I identify.
I was like, I don't want to use that word anymore. I don't like that word no more.
Identify as a health consultant.
There we go. But from that perspective, like, your first few clients, talk to me about then, just like the first person to pay you, the first few people to pay you for your services, for what you're passionate about, for what you really care about. When did that happen? You don't have to say them by name. Who are those individuals? How did that feel?
So I would say more than anything, the personal trainer route, I think, is pretty universal for anybody who is anybody who's going to be a personal trainer, and then if they open up their own gym or whatever, it's pretty universal. You usually go through a certification program. Did you go through a certification program? Did you go Okay, right. I went through NASM, right? So, and these are going to be different programs. Like NASM is the National Academy of Sports and Medicine. So there's a bunch of different
thousands.
So many.
I hate it.
But that's the thing, bro, because what you end up realizing is they're so pigeonholed in their education that, if anything, most of it is not only outdated, it's not practical. Because first off, kinesiology is only about 150 years old. Like kinesiology ain't even that old.
Very new space, right?
Very new space. Yeah. So most of our practitioners, or most of you could even say the actual certification programs, are not only outdated, they're not that practical. So I started out getting my certification, trying to just get a basic personal training job at like a gym. And there was opportunities to do the same sort of training without having to re-update my personal training certificate every 2 years, right? And so that was essentially 9-round. I looked at 9-round as a roadmap for me to be able to still do the personal training without having to necessarily continue that accreditation through those programs. Because for me, I'm going to continue my education anyway. Like, my continue education is something for my own personal well-being, because I don't want to be outdated on a lot of my concepts. Nor do I want my product of how I'm counseling, training, or even consulting people to be under quality, to be a less quality product whenever I'm putting it out there. Because now what? That's representative of me. And I don't want me to be represented in a way where my product is not only underqualified, underwhelming, but it's actually potentially more detrimental than it could be helpful, which I see a lot of that in the fitness space nowadays.
1,000%.
So yeah, my first clients, they started out as a lot of my boys, especially after 9-round, I started just doing that. I call it combat cardio. E = MC squared. Energy is where you get that, or Mitchell's combat cardio is where you get that energy, right? So
branding.
So CC, TM trademark. So I essentially started doing a bunch of combat cardio with people. That combat cardio gave me more of a niche service that I could offer to people that a lot of people can't really offer, which was that personal training without needing to be in an actual gym, because what I'm offering, that gym couldn't offer in the first place. So I retrofitted a part of my office facility to be essentially a small little gym, and I started training people out of there. And it essentially gave me the foothold of being my own boss to then open my own private practice without necessitating me having to constantly be legitimized by other outside forces, outside services, like a certification degree. But so yeah, I started out personal training a lot of my boys through the combat cardio stuff, holding mitts for them, doing a lot of combat, like I said, combat cardio work. And I eventually, especially in the last 2 years, graduated into more what I call health consultant work, which is all I'm doing for people on a weekly basis. And I have almost all my clients now that I see weekly, and some of them twice a week, is helping them with their health and wellness from a legit coaching and consulting standpoint. And I have found that to be exponentially more effective 100%. With them getting healthier.
I agree.
Because anybody can make anybody sweat, but how are you actually educating your clients to be sustained in their training? Self-sustained training.
Self-sustained strength. Hence why I was going to ask you, why'd you name it self-sustained training? Yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah, try to separate myself from every other personal trainer or health professional out there by saying, I don't want you or need you as a client. And I'm doing this because I know for a fact that if you're willing and able to put in the work that is beset before you, you are nearly guaranteed to get results. It's just the degree to which you're getting those results is dependent on your actual efforts.
I was just talking to a personal trainer that I just met. He opened up a small studio, a storefront, brick and mortar space in downtown Kansas City. It's really cool looking spot. He used to be in architecture a few years back, so he designed a very small space to make it efficient for training. Probably about max 3 people in the space. Okay. Small space. Downtown, as you're leaving Crossroads going into like the Power and Light District right before you cross over that bridge. Cool little space. So I wanted to meet with him, connected with him today. And one of the things we were talking about is like, he's just like, I've been in this space long enough that I don't want to work with you if you are not serious about actually. He's like, bro, I fired more clients than I've probably should have at this point. Because if you're going to come in here and I'm going to give you the tools, I know I can give you the tools, and I know I'm willing to coach you through it, but are you willing to be coached? And it's such a cliche phrase. I think all athletes, going back to our foundation.
Coachability, right.
Coachability, man. And people as adults begin to forget about that because they gain a certain level of status and power in their roles at home, or a certain level of
it's
status.
Life experience that gives them the arrogance to think, well, I'm an adult now. I don't need to learn something new. Who are you talking to?
There we go. Exactly. And whether that's at work or whether that's in their household, being the leader of their house, which is cool and it's important, it's important to have.
There's a place for it.
Yeah, there's a place for it. But you still need to be coachable. I don't give a shit if you're 82, 41, 17, or a 10-year-old athlete. You need to maintain your ability to be coachable throughout life. And it's so important in the wellness space. Like, so many clients I've had and may still have today, allegedly, are not coachable. How am I going to help you if you're not willing
or able to put in that work?
Hey, that'd be real quick. Hey, willing and able. Hey, okay, talk that talk, baby. But yeah, I want you to talk about, like, how do you think about that with some of these clients that you might get in the future or might have right now? Is one thing that was important that you said is, like, I don't need you as a client, and I don't necessarily need you as a client, but I know that I can help you. So, are you like, how do you decide, I guess, if the client is right for you?
So qualifying clients, we'll call it, right?
Be the word.
So the way that I'll qualify a client is first through the initial consultation. Like, I'll give you an example. I had an older gentleman, and I have plenty of older clients. I have clients in their 40s. I have multiple clients in their 50s. I have a particular client in her 60s. And all these clients are justified in their elder wisdom, in their elder skepticism, in wondering how I could actually offer them any sort of help, any sort of insights, because they're old. Well, let's reword that. They're experienced. They've been through the ringer. They know they know how life works. What is this 27-year-old really going to be able to teach them? So off rip, pretty much with everybody, I let them, and this is in the first consultation, I let them know, unless you actually know how health works, there's a reason you're in this office with me. I had a gentleman come in, older gentleman, who knew more than the average person, and after the consultation, truly wondered what I had to offer him. And he goes, I don't know if this is something that really works for me. And so if anything, he disqualified himself for me because it showed me he wanted a one-stop shop, heal me now protocol. And throughout the entire conversation, it was one of me telling him essentially, you're not going to fix this overnight. In fact, my goal is to teach you enough in this session that you'll have enough information to essentially be sustained enough to go help yourself outside of here, to where you'll never need to come back to me. I try to provide enough value in a single consultation that allows that client to qualify themselves. And most of the time, when they don't qualify, it's usually on their own merit, because I'm pretty upfront in the initial consultation of my expectations and engaging their willingness and ability. And it's so obvious to them, and it becomes almost this like silent moment of like, all right, so what's up? You ready for this? Where and I've only had probably out of maybe, let's say 100 clients on hand in the last 2 years, I've had maybe 2 or 3 that didn't stick with me for longer than a month. And those 2 or 3, 2 I can think about in particular, let's just add this most recent gentleman to the list. Even though if he came back, I would be more than happy to welcome him, because I really do feel like there's a lot I could offer to help him, specifically with the recent Crohn's experience. There is a qualifying factor of, do you even want to do this? Because if you don't waste my time. I'm not going to waste your time. And for me personally, which I alluded to at the beginning of our conversation before the cameras were even rolling, for the longest, even during my homelessness, we'll call it, I was editing videos for people. So I was always able to supplement a lot of my income through being a master video editor. Your boy Rudy, our boy Rudy. We were able to shoot a music video for Rudy during my homelessness. I flew to Kansas City to shoot a video for him, essentially. The only reason I flew and didn't drive is because it was cheaper than driving, considering how trash our car was at the time. But I flew to Kansas City to shoot a video for him. So at a certain point in the development of my business, specifically from the consultation standpoint, I started letting people know, and they understood off the initial consultation, I literally do not need you as a client. And all of my consultations, for the most part, are operated under my ministerial license, because I'm an ordained minister, which means I can offer you a service that encompasses more than just your health and wellness, which in my opinion, in order to tackle that health and wellness, you've got to tackle a lot more than just what you're eating and what sort of exercise you're exerting. So yeah, clients qualify or disqualify themselves based off their willingness and their ability to actually put in work. Because I'm not going to waste my time with nobody, and I would expect the same from them because I wouldn't want them to waste my time.
I love that. I'm gonna need your help on that, by the way.
I got you, bro. I got you.
I need help. I
got
need
you.
it.
Come in for a consultation, my
for sure. Exactly. So it's gonna be a different type of consultation.
100%, brother,
I need some
100%.
help on learn how to qualify these people, man. That's been a challenge over the past few years. It's like I feel like I'm doing everything I can for you, but you're not.
But I think they could also say something about maybe, and this isn't whatsoever to criticize or to potentially shit on your approach, but it may have something to do with the formula that you're implementing when trying to garner those clients. And that's what I had to realize with myself. Like, for example, especially when I started consulting, I had to realize I have to talk a lot less. But when I'm training, I talk way more. But in my consulting, I still have to talk a sufficient amount. Why? Because I'm teaching them something. And so in the initial stages, first, second, third consultation, Mitchell does a whole lot of talking and explaining and make sure that you're understanding it. And for those clients that aren't willing and able to endure that, I automatically know if you're not willing and able to listen to me tell you some shit, you're not going to watch a YouTube video on it. You're not going to sit there and listen to a whole lecture on it or a podcast, let alone read the scientific papers on it. You tell me you're going to read some randomized control trials when you're not even willing to listen to me for an hour, personally in front of you, tell you about all this stuff? I literally can't help you. And if I can't help you, find somebody who can, because I don't want either of us wasting our time. That's really how you qualify it. And if it's not the formula, it may be then your approach to implementing the formula. So without me knowing.
Or all of it.
Well, for sure. And I don't think it's ever just one thing or the other, because it's also the client, right? It always has that potentiality to it. And when you have 9 out of 10 Americans being technically metabolically unhealthy based off of the statistics that we can prove, which means metabolically unhealthy, 9 out of 10 Americans have problems with their metabolism. Which means if they have problems with their metabolism, they have problems fundamentally with their health. And if 9 out of 10 Americans are debilitated by that, that means 9 out of 10 people can benefit from that sort of external help.
Yep.
So at that point, they disqualify themselves.
Facts. No, I love that. Again, 6,000 things I want to ask.
My bad.
But no, don't say my bad. It's a shout out to my. It's like
that's also that Missouri side of us. You know, that's that. Oh, excuse me, my bad.
It's a shout out to you for. I'm happy with every guest that comes on the show, but I'm always super. This is gonna sound weird, but I'm gonna use this language anyways. Everyone in the comment section, go ahead and comment pause. It turns me on when people are able to communicate effectively, so that I actually can then my brain's actually stimulated because I understand what you're saying and you're providing a lot of different concepts, thought process, and I know what you're saying. And so when you can effectively communicate, clearly enunciate, say things, then I'm like, oh shit, I'm thinking about this, that. So it's really just a shout out to you, your ability to communicate and get thoughts across. So shout out to you both. But because we do hold these podcasts a little under an hour, I do want to get to an important part of the conversation, which is recently you've gone through a extremely challenging situation. I can't remember the date, but I'll let you share that.
November 12th, 2023.
November 12th, 2023, you were diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So I would like to start off by saying what triggered you to go to the hospital? Like, what happened? What was the moment, the defining moment that was like, oh shit, something's not right?
So with Crohn's disease, like any inflammatory bowel disorder or inflammatory bowel disease, so ulcerative colitis is one of them. You could just have general IBD. There is symptoms like vomiting, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, cramping. I had all that. And gastroenteritis is essentially the stomach flu. And I had a form of gastroenteritis before. So I had at least experienced those symptoms at one point in my life. So on November 12th, or November 11th, I thought it was just gastroenteritis. And the symptoms were so bad and they were recurring for so long, literally carrying over into the next day, that I literally couldn't move. And for me, not being able to move, not even being able to use the bathroom anymore, and I'd vomited all my fluids out and I'd done as much diarrhea as you could possibly do, I realized that my my own self-help had ran out, and it was time for me to actually seek out medical attention because it seemed to be that serious. So it was a severe case of what I thought was just gastroenteritis. But I go to the hospital, they run all these tests, and through their diagnosis, specifically on the location of the inflammation, they essentially assumed that it was Crohn's disease. And from that point forward, it was the end of the year, so they couldn't get me in to get a colonoscopy or to actually get the first steps moving to initiate medication to get me actually healthy. So I was left for weeks on end to essentially have to suffer with no protocol on how to remedy that suffering. And so that forced me to have to venture out and find the solutions and the answers myself, which, as you saw in the documentary, is essentially what caused me to go from a state of severe bedridden debilitation to a point where I am now currently 190 pounds solid, where I was at one point 153 pounds debilitated. And I'd went from 200 to 153, but I'm back now to 190 through my own remedies, through my own self-help protocols, we'll say.
Absolutely. And that is if you guys don't know, ladies and gentlemen, it is currently the middle of February, 2024.
Correct.
So we're looking at maybe 3.5 months out.
And a month of it was me having to suffer because I didn't know what to do. So it's really only been 2 months.
So yeah, and it was kind of interesting watching that and kind of watching this documentary and being like, okay, he told me that this is like just recently happened. So I'm like looking at you in this film,
man,
and I'm like kind of wondering like, what's he going to look like when he comes in here today?
Because imagine if I looked sickle cell like I did in that documentary.
Right. And I'm just wondering, not from a perspective of like he can't come on the show, but
of course not.
Nah, that boy look crazy. Go ahead and get up out of here. But because I was familiar and I'm sure you felt the same way, which was probably extremely mentally challenging. It was like, I'm familiar with the Mitchell that I know from IG. I'm familiar with 6 foot, 200 pound, six pack, looking like a defensive back on the Chiefs, Mitchell. And now what I'm seeing in this film, just 2-3 weeks after the Mitchell I'm familiar with, is a 150 pound man who looks extremely sick. And here we are 3 months later where you're back up to 190. You're looking solid. So there's so much to ask within that. But let's touch a little bit more in depth on what is known about Crohn's disease. What is Crohn's disease? One more time. I know you kind of explained it a little bit, but what is Crohn's disease? Is there a cure, quote unquote, for Crohn's disease? And what does the medical community have to say about it now? A lot of people will kind of understand that once they watch the film, and it kind of, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the feedback from those doctors in your documentary that will come out right now. There's a part 1, and then he's putting together a part 2, ladies and gentlemen. But watching that, I was just fucking pissed. I mean, it might just be because I'm in the wellness sector, and so I'm just like, what the? But I was like mad with these doctors.
You heard what them doctors said. They said diet had nothing to do with my disorder. So Crohn's, inflammatory bowel diseases, any autoimmune disorder. My girlfriend has celiac, which means she can't eat gluten. So any autoimmune disorder is the body essentially not being able to differentiate between healthy and unhealthy cells. So if an unhealthy protein enters your body, especially if it's inflammatory, like in certain foods, like a lectin, we'll say, or even gluten for people with celiac, these proteins are observed by the body as being so inflammatory and toxic that the body has to attack it and get it out of the system. But when you have these immune disorders, your body is not able to differentiate healthy from unhealthy proteins or other nutrients in your body. So it attacks everything. And that's why with Crohn's disease, it attacked everything. I couldn't eat any food because any food I ate, I had an allergic reaction to. So as you heard in the documentary, the only way that they can resolve it in their mind is through medication. And why do they think that? Because they know nothing about Crohn's. As you saw in the intro of the documentary, they don't know why it happens. There is no cure. And the dude who was describing it at the beginning of the documentary on the specific part where it was like, Crohn's disease is this, he was a very morbidly obese man talking about, we don't know what causes Crohn's disease. And when I tell these doctors maybe diet has something to do with it, I think there's almost an interpersonal insulting feeling they have when they're like, no, because I eat all this bullshit. So how are you going to tell me that? And I'm healthy and I'm a doctor. And I've seen people on medicine get healthy. So how are you going to tell me medicine doesn't work? And I never told them medicine didn't work. I just showed them and presented to them an opportunity to look at the alternate perspective, which is perhaps medicine isn't the end-all, be-all, let alone the best approach to remedying certain ailments or diseases.
Or the first. Yeah.
Right. And if it's not the first, let alone the end-all, be-all, you have to ask yourself, what is the actual place then of medicine? And I think it's an extreme intervention when needed. But with people, most people, especially majority of Americans, let alone majority of people with these autoimmune disorders, there's enough literature out there that aren't promoted or aren't propagated because a lot of these doctors, like the personal trainers we talked about, are inundated with old, outdated knowledge. They're like, bro, I went to school for this stuff. I already learned all this stuff. I don't have to learn anything new. We already know all this stuff. But we're being taught new things every year. And if you're not up to date on the studies, if you're not up to date on the science, and if you can't even read the studies, you have to ask yourself if you're even equipped to then be facilitating that help. And so, because these doctors, they told me flat out, there is no cure. There's no way to help you essentially other than getting you on these immunosuppressant drugs, meaning they want to suppress my immune system.
For life.
For life, which you heard her say. Mm-hmm. You heard her say that. For life, you'll be on medication. All it did, if I wasn't as knowledgeable or understanding of my place within the fitness and health and wellness realm, I would have been terrified into thinking maybe this person knows what they're talking about because they're my assigned GI specialist. They have PhD by their name. Of course, they must know what they're talking about. And then I would have gone on that immunosuppressant, would have gotten even sicker like I was in the initial stages of following their protocol. And I don't think I would have ever got to the point where I'm at now, namely in as fast as I did, namely in actually maintaining those remission-like symptoms, let alone being in what some doctors would qualify as remission.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait for people to watch this documentary just so more people can have you on their podcast to have conversations like this and more people can just have a discussion with you one-on-one, friends, family. I think a lot of people, first opinion, final opinion. PhD next to their name, first opinion, final opinion. There is a place and time to seek out medical assistance. There is a place and time to seek out pharmaceutical drugs for assistance. But you have to always maintain a level of autonomy in your brain.
That's a good point.
And be able to ask yourself and ask the doctor the necessary questions to see where they're at on this topic, where you're at on this topic, and what other options there are.
Because you may be surprised at what they say versus what options are actually out there.
100%. The final question I want to ask you, there's two final questions. One, with part 1 and part 2 of this documentary, what is the end goal? When people watch this, what are you looking for them to pick up? What are you looking for them to walk away with?
More than anything, anybody who has an inflammatory bowel disorder, specifically Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, I think it'll give them a better positive outlook on their life condition if they feel like I felt when those doctors said what they said, if they feel helpless and hopeless. I think at minimum, that's what it can offer for anybody with the same sort of debilitating disease, let alone the same qualifying experiences that you see in the documentary. First and foremost. I think secondary to that is really putting it in perspective, the autonomy that you're referencing, so long you're willing and able to put in the work to do the due diligence of researching and self-experimenting on yourself to really come to sound conclusions. And that's how I was able to learn what foods work with me, learn what foods don't work with me, and essentially get to a point where I've remedied my Crohn's enough to where I'm now in a remission-like state.
Yeah, and understand, ladies and gentlemen, everyone, and he talks about this both in the documentary and his own content, and I'm sure in your book, Healthy Made Easy, other books that you'll release, everyone is different. Each individual is different.
It's called genetic heterogeneity.
Yes, that long-ass word.
It means biological differences that get to the same outcome.
Exactly.
You can all get healthy even though we have different approaches to that healthy.
100%. But if you just accept blank, this is the absolute. This anybody that speaks in absolutes, 100% in my mind should be shut down. And those
that's an absolute statement, though.
You know what I'm saying? You ain't lying. Shut me down.
Just keep me accountable.
But straight up though, like if people are gonna be like, hey, this is it and this is only it, then like
be skeptical more than anything.
That's a better way to
maintain
look at it.
a level of skepticism for anybody that acts like they know it all. Because the people that actually know more than you, the people that know enough to be able to be worthy of taking in their information are people that are willing to admit they may not know it all.
That part.
And some of the most effective experts that I've ever met had a humility about them that was almost imposter-like syndrome-esque, where they had this feeling of, I don't ever really think I'm good enough, which is why I'm always learning.
Which is a book that I'm reading right now, which is Think Again or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, but there's 6,000 more things I want to talk about right there.
For sure.
Brother, it is your last day on earth. You're 150 years old. You've lived a long, healthy, amazing life, been able to be of service to the world, provide value, information, love, light. Like you were able to live out your truth, right? But it's your last day. Your great-great-grandchildren are sitting at your feet. They look up at you and they're like, great-great-grandpa, what's one piece of advice on how to live a good life? What are you going to tell them?
I would say be willing and able. Not to always bring it back to that, but that is such a life philosophy that caused me to write that book, especially to write it in the format of a children's book. Because I've had parents that have read it now at this point that are like, I've learned something from this book. And because they're able to learn something from it, they can further instill the principles behind the book to the children that it's intended for. So more than anything, I would tell my grandchildren or anybody that was listening that if you truly are willing to put in the work and you're able to execute that willingness, man, things will start just falling in your lap without you having to think about it. And that goes back to a faith thing. It goes back to a trusting the process thing. We could talk about that for hours. But ultimately, if you're putting in the work and you're willing to constantly put in work that you don't necessarily want to do, but you know you need to because it's what's best for that goal to achieve that goal, man, that'll really carry you to almost all your successes in life, because it'll always be fundamentally based off of your willingness to do something and your actual ability to execute that willingness.
Man, Mitchell, thank you. Where can people find you, buy your books, and continue to support you moving forward?
So you could go on Amazon and just type in Mitchell Thompson. You could go on Barnes & Nobles, same thing. I have a website called selfsustainedtraining.com, selfsustainedtraining.com. You can purchase all the books from there. I have workout programs on there. But realistically, I even did a couple talks down at Mizzou. I did a talk for an insurance company here in Kansas City. I don't really care for people to buy any of the programs or realistically to go out of their way to watch my entire library of YouTube videos or anything like that. If you go to my website, you'll see a bunch of free content that'll get you healthy without you having to do anything other than pay attention. If you can afford, again, and you're willing and able to pay attention to a few videos, I have free content on my website that'll get you healthy starting today in less than 5 minutes. So my website, selfsustainedtraining.com, is where all of my content is found. You can go on Barnes & Nobles and just look up my name, or you could type in Healthy Made Easy or Willie and Able. They'll both pop up off the first search. You can follow me on any of my social medias. My Instagram is my main social media. It's at mitch.thompson, Tomson. That's the part you spell Thompson. mitch.Tomson. I'm also really active on Facebook now because my Facebook is going crazy. A couple videos go viral. One got 2 million views. It's crazy.
Yeah.
13,000 people followed me. So my Facebook is really going viral. You can look me up on Facebook. But for the most part, any of my stuff can be found with a simple Google search, YouTube, Facebook, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, whatever it is. But mainly selfsustainedtraining.com is where you can find the one-stop shop for all my stuff.
I love it. 5-star review. We provide value with individuals who have voices of value. Follow up with him. 5-star review. Drop a comment. Drop a share. Subscribe. All the good shit. It's your boy. Salud.